because we don't want to be stuck there and just continuing to live that life waiting for them when, unfortunately, we don't know. People don't come with expiration dates stamped on them. So we don't know what that looks like, as to not miss your life.
And of course, not knowing exactly how long our lives are going to be either.
And I always tell people too, when I'm talking to people, like, I think my mental makeup is very unusual for a lot of different people. But I think we have, since I left the workforce, we have had a pretty firm realization that I've had what is really actually termed compassion fatigue. I mean, I like being a problem solver, and for our household, I'm still probably the primary problem solver when something crops up. But it's exhausting and I get tired of it. I don't have any reserves anymore to draw on when somebody, particularly our families, are having issues. And I'm always of the opinion, I can't remember if it was a television show or a movie where somebody just said in quotations, people make decisions.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast. All right. Well, hello. I'm Bree. And it's nice to put your faces to your names in your emails now. Pam and then Robert. Pamela and Robert.
Correct.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. I got all your information. I went through it, but I always like to start by learning more about you and what caused you to put your name in now for this.
We are child-free. I'm still working. Robert is retired. This Childfree Wealth, it was a pretty new discovery for us to see this focus on not saving for legacy, since we don't have legacy goals. And that was it was eye-opening for me to kind of focus on the retirement years with a slightly different approach. And it's making us reconsider if we've oversaved or how much we need to save and how much we should spend, kind of given this new take on things. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I found it interesting, the interview that was done on Morning Star, and listening to that and some of the conversation that took place there. So I found it kind of intriguing and stuff. And our previous experience, having dealt with consultations with different advisors and stuff, has always talked about there just seems to be such a proclivity for leaving a legacy goal behind for kids, charities, whatever the person is. There's never a discussion with advisors regarding actually utilizing what would be considered a reasonable, if not a significant portion of your money for yourself. It's always just legacy this, keep the money in play, long-term things, and it never comes down to, there's never a real discussion of how to enjoy and spend your nest egg if you've saved up and made some progress towards that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's very traditional of keep building, 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 and that doesn't fit you or your life. And I noticed you said on there, well, first you guys are doing everything together, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How long have you guys been married, and what really made you to decide to do everything together?
We have been married almost 29 years, and we did everything together just because we believe in that concept of putting everything together. And also just, it's simpler. When we were both working and, it took both of our paychecks at the time to pay rent and car payments and everything that we had at the time. So it just seemed like entirely too much trouble to try to keep it separate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's always been a team effort. And like we refer to the household as team gets. And even before we started saving significantly and doing things for the future, it's always just been, I don't want to use the word like traditional with us as far as, when you get married and how you do things, but there was never a discussion of separate but equal or separate finances or anything like that. Everything was immediately just combined in the bucket. Obviously your 401k plans or something similar maintains its separateness just by the nature of regulations. But as far as everything, it's always been all the saving decisions, the checking account, the spending decisions, everything's always pretty much been just one and the same. It's just been one big effort and pile of money, or however you want to frame it. It's just been always just one thing.
The only thing that we have separate now is his pension pays for all of the household expenses, just the month to month expenses. And my paycheck is going into a separate account. Not that we're trying to keep it separate for purposes of not being a couple, but that money is more dedicated to travel and fun and spending. So we're trying to just separate those more just as buckets. And it just is a coincidence that his pension is just the correct amount to cover expenses, and mine can wholly be kept separate for what we're hoping will be fun.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. It makes it easy to kind of have it dedicated. Just, it's going to go there. That's going to be fun. This is going to be paying the expenses. Nothing wrong with that at all. Makes it nice and simple too. And so there's definitely a joint togetherness. I'm curious. So Robert, you've been retired for a couple years. You guys are doing everything together. What made the decision for you to retire and then Pamela for you to keep working?
The retirement decision was really Pamela pushing me out the door from my job, frankly. I had plans. I left the workforce in basically September 1st of 2021. My original plan was to work until December of 2022. Pam encouraged me, based upon some changes at work and just my mental health and attitude towards work. She encouraged me to go ahead and leave the workforce. She said it wouldn't be a big deal. And only the last couple months before then, we had started doing a little bit deeper dive into the finances as far as just the maintenance of everything, just those expenditures and stuff. And we really knew that it probably wouldn't be a problem, that if I kept working, I would potentially have a higher pension payment. But where we were kind of the mindset that it really wouldn't move the needle enough to continue to put up with the things that were going on at my job. And so Pam sent me she sent me a friendly email while I was at work one day and told me, this is how I see it. I think you should consider this as your option. I came home from work. We talked about it the next day. I wasn't at work and I put her off. I gave her kind of a brush off, even though we talked about it. And a couple of weeks later, we were back in the same boat. I was complaining about the same things. And we just decided, she sent me another email. And the way my work schedule was, I worked shift work in public safety. And so we were getting ready to have what we call our larger break from work. So I had what we call a 5-day break, which allowed me to kind of mull things over. And she told me that by the end of the 5 days, I want you to have made a decision. Either you're going to go ahead and submit your paperwork and leave, or I don't want to hear any more about it. I mean, it was a friendly thing, but she just said, you can't continue to be having the same complaints, same issues. It's just not a good thing. And so at that point, I decided that I would go ahead and submit my paperwork. And at that point in time, the exit strategy became very quick and very compressed because of 401k contributions, a bunch of stuff. I could not have left any later than I did. And if I'd have left any later than we set the date for September 1st, I would have been either taking a tax hit or suffering some small penalties. But I decided we were able to get everything to work out rapidly, even though we were behind the recommended time frames that go with the job and with submitting your paperwork for retirement and submitting your request for pension and stuff like that. And we also knew that if I went any longer in, it would affect the filing of our federal and state income taxes the next year to the negative, where it wouldn't be as beneficial to leave when I did. That was it. And so I've been retired since then, and Pam has continued to work. I'll let her answer her side of why she's still working versus not.
Well, my job in 2020 went remote, like everyone's did, and then it turned into permanent telework. So basically my job is much simpler and easier, and I have a much easier home life. So by not having to commute, I had about a 20-mile commute each way. That was not horrible, but not fun. It's been great. And he's home and we have lunch together, and it's worked out really well. So my job, I'm continuing to work because it's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. I have an administrative job and just work days. His job in public safety, he was working 24 hours. The lifestyle change with him sleeping every night and not having to coordinate our social life and vacation life around securing leave for him, it's just made things much easier. And my job it's not hard enough that it's holding us back from doing some things that we want to do. At this point, I've been at the job a long time and I have a pretty generous amount of vacation leave and holidays. So it's working out pretty nicely.
Okay. That's good to hear kind of the different things. Also, this might be the first time I've ever heard a couple emailing each other like, hey, you got to quit complaining or quit. Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. I highly encourage you to schedule a Childfree Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button.
Right. Well, that's one of the things with being in public safety and running calls all the time. He wasn't necessarily available. And it's really frustrating if you're in the midst of a phone call and then he gets punched out on a call. It's kind of easier to handle things by email where you can read it at your leisure. So that's one reason that our relationship was so email heavy. And at the time he didn't have a cell phone, so text was not an option.
That's true. I was late. I didn't have a cell phone until after I left the workforce. And just so you understand, I worked for the fire department, which was 24-hour shifts. And so that's why she would email me anything she needed throughout the day. And since I didn't have a cell phone and with interruption, we would typically just talk. We had like a nightly, if possible, if I wasn't busy, we would have like a nightly phone call at like 8 p.m. But like she said, it was just simpler for her, I think, to put her thoughts in writing and let me look at it and read it at my discretion and think about it and stuff like that. And the same with the second email, which was slightly longer, but had some other information in it too. Like she had formed the second email, I think had even more actual math and numbers in it. She had thought through everything thoroughly, and we had been discussing it for quite some time. Like we had already made some financial decisions in preparation for retirement before then. So it wasn't, the timeline was altered, but the plan was not really altered too much.
Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense now by email versus text too, not having the cell phone there. So, okay, a lot of pieces are coming together then. Now life is different. You're retired, you're still working, and it's a little bit easier to communicate. You get to have lunch together. And I saw it looked like on one thing, it said it looked like you wanted to retire within the next year. And the other thing, it said you wanted to keep working a few more years. Can you talk to me about that?
My work is kind of being dictated by our family, basically my mother. We both have, our mothers are both still alive. We live in the same town. We're about 30 minutes from my mother. And we would like to relocate back down to Texas, where Robert's originally from. But with an 85-year-old mother, that's a tough move to make and leave her. We're in kind of a holding pattern, so to speak, where as long as my mother's still alive and I'm able to be local to help, she doesn't need a lot of care, but I do help out with some things. It makes sense for me to continue working. The relocation and leaving work seems to largely be driven by our geographic hold here. My job could be flexible enough that I could relocate and keep the job. That will be a conversation when that's actually an option. At the moment, just staying here local, and I do report into the office about once a quarter or so. So that's kind of where it could be within the next year, could be a couple of years, don't know.
That's fair and very valid there. If you could, well, looking at your numbers, you're going to be fine. But would you want to retire just today and say, hey, I'm just going to start living life, being retired, doing some other things, taking care of mom, spending more time together, and then diving deeper into some of the other things you'd like to do?
That's certainly an option. It feels kind of good to continue to line the coffers in the meantime, because as I said, my job's, it's pleasant, it's enjoyable, it's fine. It's not terribly demanding. I don't put in a lot of overtime. It's not burdensome to keep working. But the idea of stopping working totally and just having more freedom in a day and a week and a month is appealing. We're trying to strike a balance between the two.
I think it's because I think primarily one of the things is like right now our current situation is Pam's job is pretty easy to get time off from work. And so it allows us to, we have her continuing to work is a couple things. First off, it allows us to have pretty much an unlimited travel budget if we so choose. The constraint there is more just a matter of time off, but we've even discussed that. So it feels very loose and free to just be able to travel, which is what we do. It's kind of like our hobby thing. We don't travel nearly as much as some people, but when we do travel, it allows us to feel unburdened, so to speak, so that anything we want to do, activities, whatever. And we're slowly but surely ramping up how we travel, like in a better way than we have in the past, mainly because we have this cushion that's just, comes in every month or two, or every 2 weeks in the form of her continued paycheck. And then the other aspect of it is, I'm not sure if Pam fully retired, there would not be enough to occupy her here socially or activities wise. And that's just, she knows that. She sometimes, I think, forgets it, but she would not want to spend 8 hours a day with her mother in the situation it's in over there. And with that and the social network and everything else going on, I think it's just as easy. Like, it just continues to allow just enough structure in her week that there is structure, but it still allows full flexibility. And her job is such that if we decide to travel or make plans, and we usually are pretty long lead travel people, so we don't just say, hey, 2 weeks from now, we're going to go, do something. We typically do a little more planning than that. And so but her job is so flexible that anytime she puts in a time off request, there's virtually no scenario in which it's not going to be approved. And so it's really easy to deal with that situation where you have the income, you have the time off, and you still have just enough structure to continue to have a formal week. I've done really well without work structure. Like, I'm always going to be a structure person with my week and my days and stuff. Like, I have a plan, even though to most people it would be a very mundane, boring plan. But as I'm an introvert, and so my days are just the way I like them. As I tell people, I'm not out there changing the world. I do try to change some things in a good way for people when that comes about. I think Pam is good with her current structure and her current management and stuff. I think she will be much better fully retired when we live in Texas, when there's more activities to do that we're interested in doing. And the weather is better year round, particularly where we want to live down in South Texas. So you don't have to worry about, is it going to snow today? Is it going to, be raining today? I mean, there are pros and cons to everywhere and everything, but I think we have more opportunity for social outings and engagements, particularly during the summer months and at post-move versus right now.
Okay. That's helpful. With the move and having more of a social network down in Texas, then, are there particular hobbies that you do more of in Texas that maybe you can implement a little bit while you're still living up north further?
We do. I mean, we have a network of friends here in church, and travel from here is a little bit... Well, travel to Europe is a little bit easier from the East Coast, obviously, than from Texas. The travel component is a big hobby, as he mentioned, and not easier from here. So, yeah, I mean, I do have some activities and things. There's a little less going on a week-to-week basis as far as like festivals and small things happening in towns. There's a little bit less of that here, and it's always a little bit more weather dependent. Or there's more of a chance of things in the spring and fall getting rained out here than they are there. But yeah, we do have activities and things here.
Yeah, and we go to Texas a couple times a year, but we primarily go down there for a long break in the middle of the summer to go down there and take advantage of the warm weather and some outdoor and water activities that we do when we're down there that we don't do up here. The weather is always, it's just, we're joking like right now, where we're at here, it's just, summer is nowhere to be found right now, yet we've already past Memorial Day. And, yesterday the temperatures were extremely low and the rain and everything. And it can be very bleak when you think that the weather should be warmer or nicer. And we both have gotten to where we don't really enjoy the winter weather anymore. I certainly don't miss working in the winter weather. It was a novelty when we moved up here and I liked it, but I didn't, the longer I've been involved in it and dealing with it, the less I like it. But to Pam's point, from a travel perspective, what we do travel-wise, we're very fortunate right now to be able to travel and fly where we want to. The connectivity here is much better than where we'll be living, which is in San Antonio down the road. The travel connectivity there is virtually non-existent, and that if you want to go someplace, you have to go someplace else first and then take a flight. And we plan to continue to do that travel. So like right now with Pam's job and work, we're just trying to take full advantage, understanding that we're in a good spot for connectivity to do different things, whether we go to Texas or whether we go to the Caribbean or whether we go to Europe. It's easy flexibility with a little bit of planning.
With kind of trying to balance that out there, do you guys have a list of places that you want to make sure you visit while you're still living up north further and you're on the East Coast? You've got that easy connectivity because, yeah, San Antonio, there's not a hub there, unfortunately. You're going to Dallas or to Houston.
Right. We do. We're doing kind of a little bit of the Die with Zero and some other things that we've read. So we have these places where we want to go and things that we want to do. And some of them ideally need to be done probably before we turn 70, maybe even before we turn 65. A lot of places, especially in Europe, they're not handicap friendly. Curbs are all not the same height. There's cobblestones. So we are working through a list of places that we do want to go sooner rather than later, some based on geography and some just based literally on age and our ability to tromp around, as easily as we can. Now we know that doesn't always last forever.
Yeah, I think too, Pam would say back to our original starting of traveling externally of the U.S., I've always kind of been the point person who's kind of picked the places. And back in the day when you would go and actually pick up a magazine at the bookstore and read an article, that's how it typically would start. And I would read something and it would be very compelling and interesting. And then I would do a little more research. And so we would do that. And we've always been kind of ahead, like we've gone to places before everybody else has shown up. And we've been really lucky in that respect, which makes it, it makes it seem more of a treat at the time. And then you look back and you see places, oh, heck, we were there 10 years ago and now it's on the cover of it's in every Instagram travel photo or such. And that list changes dynamically based upon what I've seen. We definitely have some more significant things we'd like to do that we haven't quite done yet. We've never taken a trip to Asia and I'd like to do that, but we just haven't planned for it yet. But that list, like there's a loose bucket list of places and then invariably something comes up and I'm like, oh, well, we should definitely do that. And it just gets moved to the front of the list. So the places that are still on the bucket list, they still exist because things keep moving ahead as such. And our travel plans have already been altered for the coming year based upon some surprises. And like I can tell you, basically, we're probably going to be planning. We're probably already pre-planned for all of 26 and the rest of 25. And if you'd have asked me a couple of months ago what we were doing, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. And then suddenly everything's come together out of the blue and landed in our lap. And I have a strategic plan for what we're going to be doing and such. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll all come to fruition.
This is one of the points that we want to talk to you about and where we may have extra funds to spend is we're working on that balance between keeping enough anticipation and excitement about upcoming trips and wanting them all to be, kind of separate and exciting in and of themselves. But on the other hand, I would like to book more of them. And I don't know, I've never really maxed out on the number of vacations that we've taken in a year. And so I'm like, I don't know if 4, 5, 6 is the right number for us, and I'd like to push until I'm like, okay, 14 is too many. We need to go do fewer than that. He kind of wants to stick with 4 or 5. If that's the biggest conflict we're having, that's a great problem to have. So.
Whether it's too many vacations or not enough, this is a fantastic problem.
Exactly.
With traveling, is it something where you guys always are traveling together? Or is it something where maybe, hey, you do take a lot more trips and try and get to see as many as possible and see what feels good? And you can do more individual, or you do want to do it all together?
I occasionally will travel with some of my college friends. There's a group of 5 girls. And so we do some trips together. That's probably the only time that I've traveled without him. And it's just girls, so none of the other husbands are coming. And then he's much more of a history and geography buff than I am. So we've looked at some escorted tours. There's one he's interested in that goes primarily through Germany that, quite frankly, would be a waste of money for me to accompany him on this trip. That is one area that's interesting that you mentioned that. That's something that we only recently have been noodling is for him to do a trip like that on his own. I don't necessarily have ones on my list at the moment that I'm interested in doing solo. And I don't think either one of us are interested in doing like major adventures solo. Like I'm a little bit of a cautious traveler. He a little bit is too. So the idea of doing like an escorted trip, especially when it has a theme around a historical event, that's kind of the only individual travel that we've noodled at the moment.
I think that's true. Pam sent me on my own in February to escape a severe cold snap. She sent me to the Caribbean by myself to a place we had been before, and it was great. And she was super supportive and spectacular. I had a spectacular time. It was far exceeded expectations, when you're primarily relying on Mother Nature. But it was a box check for her. Everything came off fine and was good. I had no problems and no issues. And last September, Pam traveled to Texas by herself to take care of some things for our household down there. So we're not averse to traveling separately. But I think Pam's right in that me in particular, I probably would prefer an escorted tour if I was traveling by myself, just for the logistics of it. But the thing that I think is frustrating is when you look at the single versus double occupancy on everything, there's not the commiserate price break that you think that there should be for traveling solo. They still basically want to charge you the price for 2, even though you're just one person there. I wish that the travel industry would understand there's more single adults out there, particularly single seniors out there. And for men, I think it's more challenging because we've encountered tour groups abroad traveling, and it's easy. The women, this sounds very unusual, but the women always outlive the men, and then they just pair up and travel together. So they stay together, they're friends, they have a network, they make those trips, those escorted trips together, versus you don't really see men traveling together as seniors. Obviously, it is what it is. Nobody knows in any particular household if the man or the woman is going to live longer than the other. You have no idea how that's going to play out. Or if you're going to die within 2 days of each other. But it's easy to see the women who are traveling together as seniors by themselves, but you just never see men doing that same thing. And I think for me, I'm not an entrepreneur, so I'm not going to be doing this. But if I was speaking at a travel conference in front of a bunch of travel agents and providers, I would explain to them they need to do a better job of marketing and coming up with itineraries and stuff for single men, whether they be middle-aged or late-aged or not. But we've talked about it, and I think Pam might. I'm not averse to being sent on one of these trips by myself. We just haven't done it yet because the nature of the itinerary and solo, it's still pretty expensive to do it. So we haven't broached the cost hurdle yet for one person yet.
So I want to call something out in this. And when I asked earlier about continuing to work for Pamela, and it was keep working because it provides us an unlimited travel budget, looking at all of your numbers, if you were both retired today, you'd be okay. And in fact, I'd be like, let's work on spending more money. Probably still going to be the conversation of how can we spend more. I would not get hung up on that single versus double cost and what the difference is there, because typically in this situation, I'd probably be more like, let's go towards retirement. But you had a very clear reason of why to keep working and using that money to travel. So let's use it to travel, even if it is going to be more expensive for single occupancy, but it allows you to go do something that you enjoy. That's okay if you're spending more on that because you're not having to worry about leaving a legacy or leaving money behind. And looking at everything, if I go through and I look you're probably going to end up dying with more money than you want to leave behind right now. So it's really a plan of how can we utilize more of that. So if it means, hey, the single occupancy is $4,000 and the double occupancy is $3,000, well, yeah, it doesn't really seem like a fair shake there, or you know what I mean, the numbers. I think I'm backwards there, but that's fine. Just spend it, enjoy the trip, have fun, and it's okay if you're spending more and it feels a little bit uneven. Go have a great time regardless. It doesn't need to be as big of a concern looking from everything that I have from you guys.
Yeah,
that.
I think too, one of the things I would say too with my job is the best thing about there's been no negatives for me to having left the workforce, because I could say that I was definitely probably burned out as such. But it's the best part, or one of the best parts, is the fact that I don't have to go ask permission and not come to work. I never, when you work a schedule like we worked in the job, we had to do a lot of lead time and a lot of planning. And even then I had to, I was crossing my fingers behind my back as to whether or not they would say, yes, you can have this time off from work. And not having to go through that these days has been so much better. That if somebody, even if it's something local, somebody wants to do something, my schedule is always flexible enough, unless we're out of town traveling, to say I can say yes in a moment's notice, instead of having to say, well, let me check my schedule and see what that's like.
Yeah, and that's okay to do. And maybe having more spontaneous trips too, maybe Pamela, that helps you see with the numbers too, of like, hey, I want to travel more. Adding in some spontaneous trips that aren't planned out might be something that gets you excited too. And just as much as you can do it with your job, I don't know how much time you have to put in before you say, hey, I'm going. That might be an option too, because it sounds like travel is kind of your guys' big thing. I'm not hearing a lot of other things. It's mainly like, we love to travel. We like trying all these different places.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that's our biggest joint activity.
Yeah, that's definitely if somebody were to ask, what are your hobbies other than fitness and exercising together, that would be our primary thing, would just be travel together, whether it's a lazy vacation at the beach or it's something where you're more active and, engaged with a group or a guide or something like that. So it's definitely, we've always enjoyed it and have never had any buyer's remorse over any trip that we've taken anywhere at any time.
That's good to hear. With the Asia trip, and you said it keeps getting put on the back burner, but it's something you really want to do. Do you have kind of dates lined up for it, or is it there's not really anything lined up for it? It's just something you want to do?
As much as I do love to travel, I do not usually enjoy time on a plane. For that trip, I really do want to have maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks to commit for that trip. And I don't know that my job is quite flexible enough for me to take 4 weeks of vacation consecutively. And I cannot work abroad. I can work anywhere in the US, but I'm not able to log into our network abroad. So I can't even do like a bit of a keep up with work while I'm traveling, just for purposes that I just don't think that I can bear to make a flight that long and then turn around a week later and get on a flight home. That one we may put off until I quit working, just so we can make it really long. And it's only been in the last year or two that we've considered that we really had enough money to make that trip, because it's also, it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks of hotel stay plus the travel cost. That one's going to be a pretty big trip.
Yeah, that's true. We're definitely not backpackers and hostel people. So
No.
when we travel, we typically are at least in the mid-range of, we're not luxury travelers, but we're also, again, we're not just taking a waterproof bag and slinging it on and rucking it from town to town and taking the local bus as such, other than just in town like that. So Pam's right, it will. And she doesn't want to go over for an insignificant amount of time.
Yeah, that's valid. Wanting to have that longer chunk there, because it is a long flight to get across anywhere, especially going to Asia. It's going to take you quite a long time. If you've kind of started like at least looking at some of that and kind of aiming for, okay, hey, setting a retirement date, this is what I'm working for, and then we're going to go do this really big trip, take a lot of time, that can be helpful. Another thing, do you guys have global entry at all?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. I was like, if you didn't have it, I was going to tell you need to get it.
Yeah. We got on that I want to say like within the first 6 months or a year that it even came out, we were on them.
Yeah.
Pretty
And
quick.
it seems, to your point, it seems to be like, I'm stunned coming back, re-entering into the U.S. as to the difference in lines these days between global entry and just regular people who are returning. It seems to be even a bigger benefit than it was 10 years ago plus.
Yep, exactly. Just walk right through. It took me 5 minutes to get back in this weekend. Like, yeah, looking at that regular line. Good. So you've got that. You kind of know the places to travel out of and enjoying a lot of it. You talked about mom and being close to her and that kind of being something. Is there anything that we need to consider with her that might impact your plan as far as some of these travel things, moving, probably stay closer to her until later on? Like, we don't know exactly. Other factors that might influence your life.
That's kind of an unknown. I don't think that it will impact us financially, but I can't say 100% for sure that it won't. Yeah. And at the moment, I mean, she's completely independent. So I don't, I'm not needed around for actual care. And we have gone on, 1 and 2, we're going on a 2-week trip to Texas in 2 weeks. And that's, I don't need to be around to take care of her. So we are able to do that kind of travel. She probably would have pause if we went out of town for 4 weeks, but it would be fine. It would be fine.
So nothing that too major is going to impact. What about you, Robert? What about your mom? Is there anything major that would necessarily impact your guys' travel plans or what your life really looks like the next few years?
I don't think so. I have a younger sister who is a high financial earner, much higher household income than we have ever had by a long shot. And she has kind of we kind of have the same plan for both our mothers as to what we would do if they have to receive some type of assisted care. My sister tends to give us the impression that she has additional financial resources to help out with that as such. But I mean, we would probably, in either case, we would probably, if they had to be in a facility, we would probably just use the home equity and sell the primary residence that they both have, because they're both, both our moms are single. Both our fathers have already passed away. They both have homes. And my mom at least has a small amount of money set aside that's supposed to be used as when we've told her this, that's to be used as the initial monies for any type of primary care needs. As such, that I'm under no illusions, and nor do I care. I'm not looking for an inheritance. I don't care about any of that stuff. Whatever home equity and this small cash money she has set aside will be utilized as needed immediately as such. But frankly, I don't have I don't have a positive plan where either one of our parents are supported by us. That is for a variety of money history reasons. I have very strong feelings about providing for either one of them out of our resources beyond a bare minimum. I would say the broad answer is no. We don't have any plans to have to do a significant capital outlay for them. Back to the point though about Pam working, that's part of I'm not fully secure in our resources and plan, very morbidly here, until both of our parents have passed away because of their history with money. They both seem to be living exponentially longer than they should, given their health and their behavior. And Pam can say, she's heard me say this. I mean, we talk about, how much longer are we going to hang around or do whatever or continue. And she uses the term holding pattern. But I am somewhat deathly afraid that either we're going to have to provide resources for them more significant than I would be comfortable doing, or frankly, I'm more afraid that they're both going to live another 20 years. And next thing you know, we're going to be 75 years old and wonder what the hell happened. And why are we still doing what we're doing? Because we've just decided to wait this out and these people have never passed away. And I'm not trying to, as we used to say at work, I'm not trying to bury anybody and have a funeral. But just like the thing about travel, you don't know how long these people are going to live. And so how long are we willing to just sit in an infinitesimal loop and just continue? I mean, I'm embracing it and enjoying it. I'm happy and comfortable, but I would also say I'd probably have some buyer's remorse if you told me 10 years from now we're still living where we are and we still haven't relocated, because I also understand that relocation is a game that's not played well by 60 and 70-year-old people. Just the stress of it, the physical aspect of it, and things like that. So I'm under no illusions, and Pam and I have talked about this, that at some point we're going to have to put up or shut up. It is what it is. I mean, as I would say, our families have made their own financial choices throughout their years, and they're going to have to figure it out either with or without us, one way or the other. And so that seems somewhat very crass. If we were pouring a tall bottle of red wine and I went through the list of things that our families have done, I don't know if there's enough eye drops in the world for all the eye rolling that I'd be doing.
Okay. In listening to some of y'all's podcast and reading the book and things, as you can imagine, one of us is much better at boundaries than the other one.
Yeah, that's usually how it is. That's pretty typical. What I'm hearing is want to travel, want to do a lot of that. Yes, there's stuff with parents that have been a concern, but it really needs to be maybe a longer discussion and figuring out what precisely that future looks like, and also going, hey, I know my boundaries and these are what they are. I don't want to go past that. We need to make a move potentially sooner than we necessarily think, because we don't want to be stuck there and just continuing to live that life waiting for them when, unfortunately, we don't know. People don't come with expiration dates stamped on them. So we don't know what that looks like, as to not miss your life.
And of course, not knowing exactly how long our lives are going to be either.
And I always tell people too, when I'm talking to people, like, I think my mental makeup is very unusual for a lot of different people. But I think we have, since I left the workforce, we have had a pretty firm realization that I've had what is really actually termed compassion fatigue. And that by the nature of my work, for being in the fire department for many, many, many years, the total time was almost 30 years, that I've seen a ton of things, I've done a ton of things. And as far as I was just tired at the end of dealing with everybody else's problems. And, that's just part of it. I like being a problem solver. And for our household, I'm still probably the primary problem solver when something crops up. But it's exhausting and I get tired of it. I don't have any reserves anymore to draw on when somebody, particularly our families, are having issues. And I'm always of the opinion, I can't remember, it was a television show or a movie where somebody just said in quotations, people make decisions. And that's just the lens I look through it through. And I think you kind of get that. And it still, whether I want to use the term haunts me today or not, but I think it does make me different than most siblings, most children and stuff like that. I think I operate in a very unusual space compared to other adults floating around, with their families and stuff like that. Like I'm never going to be the one clamoring for a church picnic, family reunion type get together as such for more than the briefest amount of time.
That's fair. And it, with your career background, it makes sense that you've got some compassion fatigue and just are like, nope, people do make their decisions and that's it. Makes a lot of sense. Have you guys ever engaged a financial planner before that's really helped you kind of go through all the numbers and just work on life and financial planning? Or is this your first time really sitting down and then potentially digging deeper into conversations as well?
Yeah, we have met with some financial planners. We've done we did meet with a guy a couple of years ago, but he didn't really give us it was also before 2020, which the market has done amazing things since then. So our numbers have changed significantly. And I think even the forecast he put in that he came up with at the time has changed significantly. And we just met with him one time. It was a fee only,
Okay.
We met with him for 2 hours and we haven't had follow-up appointments. So we haven't.
Okay.
So yes, we've had people look at our numbers, but we have not set forth a definitive spending plan or work through exactly the order to go through our assets and, in all of the tax plan, lifetime tax planning and healthcare planning. We have some ideas, but no, we haven't had professional help on that.
Okay. So it's just been the one-time look and it's not really been any sort of diving deeper, because that going through and having longer conversations, having ongoing planning is typically how we see people feel a lot more confident in their numbers, just because it does take time to go through and show like, this is what it looks like. And then people will say, okay, and they'll come back and go, but what about this or that or this or this? And so we just have to kind of go through a lot of those things to really feel good and confident in those numbers, what they look like, also making sure it matches your life and what you want with the potential move to Texas. That's obviously going to be great for a tax perspective without any capital gains tax in Texas or income tax. So that's super beneficial for you and is saving you some money right away. But going through and having deeper conversations, putting those things together might give you more peace of mind of what everything looks like versus just the one time, here's what it is. Because sometimes you just need that little extra, let's go through it, let's feel really good about it in order to make you kind of take the next jump. And especially if that's kind of something that's coming up when we're talking about Pamela, you continuing to work, is can we still do a lot of these travel things with you retiring? Does it change significantly? What does that look like? I have a feeling just looking at things now, your travel budget probably will go up a bit regardless, but just making sure like this is what it looks like. You're good to keep doing these things. And it sounds like a lot of your spending is already in line with what your values are. So there might not be many adjustments there, might be some, but getting you to that point where you can go do those things. I did see a note in here about you wanted to do slow travel before relocating while house free. So is that selling your current house and you just want that to be gone while you travel through?
That's something that it would just be a timing issue if it actually happened. In a perfect world, when you can plan all of these things out, and as we just talked about, a lot of these things have dates that we don't know what they are. It just strikes me as being a fun opportunity to, like you said, sell our house, sell the vehicles, have a small amount of stuff in storage, and spend, say, 3 to 6 months traveling and not worried about, have the pipes frozen? Is there a water leak at the house? Has the grass overgrown? We've been living in our house for, with like over 25 years. It just would be like pretty exciting to know that there was nothing that we needed to worry about at home while we were gone. Like, has the car been stolen from the airport? Well, no, because we don't have one. That strikes me as being pretty exciting. Whether it'll actually pan out or not, I'm not 100% sure.
That is helpful to know and put more context behind that. Would it be helpful to work through a plan and set more specific dates of, hey, by this age, we're moving regardless of mom's health, whether that looks like we're going to make the move, we're going to retire at this age and then go do these things that we've been talking about and wanting to do?
I'm not going to answer that question because it's not my question to answer. That's how I would frame that.
In theory, that sounds fantastic. Whether I'm actually able to put that into practice and stick with those dates when they actually come, I don't know. What is coming up for you when you say you're not sure if you could truly stick to those dates? Like, where does that come from? Guilt.
That would have been my answer for her on her behalf. It's pure mental guilt is keeping everything status quo currently.
Okay. Guilt. How? So tell me more about the guilt.
I would just feel like I was leaving my mom in the lurch. Like I would be concerned about how she was, what she would need. Is there anything I should or could be doing to make her life easier? And I'm not there to do it. And that it is unreasonable for me to say that because she is a completely functioning adult right now. And there are other people who check in on her all the time and can help take care of her if she needed things. That's just me. She doesn't actually need anything, nor does she actually demand anything specifically of me.
And that's valid to have those feelings and just that's normal. It doesn't mean you want them to be there, but it is. I think at some point people can have that guilt and say, man, I want to be there and to do these things. But at the same time, it's also, you can do those things. You can also engage people who can check on her for you and give a report. Sometimes people are more honest with somebody who's not their child. They might be more honest to have, like, if you have a aging care manager check on her and say, oh, so went wrong or this happened or whatever, and who can report back to you that she might not tell you herself. So that's another option for you too, to have somebody check in on her. And do you think that would help you feel a little bit less guilty?
Probably, yeah.
with that, when you say also being there and making sure there are things, do you have to physically do things for her? Or is it you could hire somebody to do it? Or you can always come back and visit as well and do things?
Yes, someone could be hired to take care of a number of those things, but she doesn't necessarily have the funds to do that. So that's when it starts tapping into our money. And those are not necessarily things, that's not what we, at this point, or even, I mean, that's not how we even want to plan to spend our money, like on lawn care or house cleaning or something like that. She doesn't have the money to do that. And we're not willing to take that on.
Yeah, to that point about the finances, it would just be easier for us to just continue doing what we're doing. Like as much as I have grand plans, it's much more comfortable to just continue to roll with what we're doing now currently from a financial perspective than to pack our bags, move, and then start having to shell out money out of the door right away to help maintain some level of normalcy over at at Pam's mom's home as such. And there's also a factor of which it would take forever. We would take up the entire afternoon. Pam has an older sister who lives with her mother. Her older sister is disabled by choice and provides no level of assistance, mental, physical, or anything whatsoever. Her sister and her mother it's a very unusual situation. We've talked, for me, sending any funds into that household, I'm not funding one person, I'm funding two. And Pam's sister is somebody that if I have compassion fatigue for normal people, I have zero tolerance to provide any level of support whatsoever to her sister, who has been out of the workforce now for well over 15 years of her own actions, of her own choice, of her own volition. And they are both living off of, her mother lives off Social Security only with no fallback. And her sister lives off some Social Security disability with no fallback and no money and no income and no job prospects and no desire to leave the home. So financially, if we're providing support for one, in actuality, we're providing support for two. And that is not something that is going to be permitted to happen as such whatsoever. And there's a long history of problems related to that. But so that's also another, I could spend 2 hours trying to explain to you what's going on over there and then have you be like, then I would be wondering, okay, what's the response to this, to all of this now going to be? So we come back full circle to just the part about it's just as easy to somewhat maintain status quo, but by the same token, an expiration date on the status quo. As I say, I bought the loaf of bread, it has a date on it. I don't want to eat that bread once the date's passed by on it. Or the same with a gallon of milk. Once the date's passed on the milk, you don't want to drink it in perpetuity because it's going to get sour.
Hey listeners, like what you're hearing? Don't miss a thing. Sign up for the Childfree Wealth newsletter for weekly tips, tools, and podcast updates. Head to childfreewealth.com/newsletter to get on the list. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense there. And I saw the note about the sister with your mom. I was wondering if it could be something where maybe she sells her house and moves into a community that can take care of some of those things for her too. That could also be an option. With the sister, it might be trickier.
Yeah, she just really doesn't have the funds for it.
Even with selling the house then?
She won't sell the house because the house is where her sister's going to live.
Yeah, and
so the sister is never going away out of the picture. And all of the property and what little financial resources there are have all been, the will has already been written to where, and again, it's not an issue financially. We don't care. But everything has been placed in a trust on behalf of her sister at her mom's passing. And so the property, the house, everything goes from there as such. So there's not even an option to sell the property to leverage that equity in the property and the land whatsoever, because then her sister would not have a place to live in theory. But that's why that's not even an option. It is somewhat of an option, I'm hoping, in a catastrophic situation. But I think at that point, it's going to be a battle over what's going to happen as such. So we'll just have to wait and see and deal with it then, I guess.
Yeah. And that house isn't worth enough to buy into a place that could offer, into what are they, CCRs? It would not bring enough funds to get into one of those.
Yeah, as it currently stands now, if her mother has to receive care, it's probably going to be Medicaid long-term care. Like, there's not even enough assets. Like, I don't know how Medicare would treat the property, and I'm not the legal expert on it, but the thing is going to her sister, and I don't know what's going to happen. I dread the day that something does happen, which is why I hope in both of our parents' cases that they pass suddenly and not prolonged, because from a financial leverage standpoint, they're both, they already have one foot on a banana peel and are just scraping by. They both have debt still. One of them has credit card debt, revolving credit card debt, and virtually no assets. And the other one has, my mother still has a mortgage that she's paying on, and it's nowhere near being paid off there either. So there's not even home equity on my side of the family for her to do something similar to what you're saying either, because of their choices that they've made.
Okay. That's helpful to know all those things and put them together. I'm just trying to think of ways that we can maybe reduce some of the guilt so we can get an expiration date on moving and saying, hey, we're going to go, we're going to do these things. Because if we can work towards a plan that allows you to do that and also reduces some of that guilt, I think that would make a nice, happy medium for both of you. Because I'm hearing, Robert, you're like, hey, I got a life that I want to live. And Pamela, you're like, I got a life that I want to live, but I also feel guilty in the background as well. And that's okay to have both those feelings, but it's going forward and realizing that this is your life and how can we take and move that and go forward together. Making a plan can be super helpful here. We are running up towards the end of our time. Are there any other questions? I have time, so I'm not worried if you have time, but I can answer any other questions that you have. I'm happy to go through those as well.
I'll go first, and then I don't really have any questions. If you have any final questions you'd like to ask us, go ahead before lunchtime or whatever. But I don't have any specific questions per se. I'll let Pam speak to hers.
No, I don't right now. And poked around on your website quite a bit, and in listening to the podcast and things, so I'm familiar. But it is very hopeful to talk with you and know that you are available to outline or help with some of these non-financial issues, because I feel like we may financially be in a pretty good spot, but I know that there's a lot to retirement that's not on the spreadsheet.
Yes, exactly. Retirement is definitely more than a spreadsheet. There is a lot more. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.